It was supposed to be just another protest, another march, another speech, another night where voices echoed through the streets, demanding justice. But on that evening, something happened that no one saw coming. A single moment, one act of unchecked power, turned into a national scandal. And it all started with an officer who thought he could silence a woman. The streets of downtown Atlanta were packed. Signs waved in the air, voices chanted in unison, and the tension between protesters and police officers was undeniable. Among the crowd stood Zariah Monroe, a community organizer with a reputation for speaking truth to power. She wasn't just there to chant, she was there to lead. Dressed in a simple yet striking Ankara print dress, her hair pulled into a tight bun, Zariah stood tall on the courthouse steps, her voice cutting through the noise. Enough is enough. We are tired of being ignored, of being brutalized, of having our voices drowned out by corruption and fear. But before she could finish, a police officer stepped forward. Sergeant Lucas Barrett. Tall, broad-shouldered, with a buzz cut and an air of superiority, he carried himself like a man who had never been told no in his life. He shoved his way through the crowd and climbed onto the steps. "All right, that's enough," Barrett barked, his voice dripping with authority. "You're inciting a riot. I'm giving you one chance to step down." Zariah didn't even flinch. "This is a peaceful protest," she shot back, unwavering. "We have every right to be here." The officer's expression darkened. He reached for his baton, tapping it against his palm like a warning. "Step down, now." And then, in one swift move, he grabbed her wrist. The crowd gasped. Cameras shot up, recording every second. The chant stopped. The tension was thick. For a moment, time froze. Then, Zariah yanked her arm free. "You will not silence me!" Barrett's patience snapped. He shoved her, hard. She stumbled back, barely catching herself before falling off the steps. The collective gasp of the crowd was deafening. And then, chaos. People surged forward, screaming in outrage. Officers rushed in, barricading the crowd. Protesters raised their phones, capturing every single angle. But one video, in particular, would change everything. Within minutes, the footage was live-streamed on social media. Zariah standing firm. Barrett shoving her. The unmistakable aggression in his stance, the arrogance in his eyes, the way he reached for his cuffs as if arresting her would erase the moment. What he didn't know was that the entire city was watching. And it wasn't just Atlanta. By the time the protest was forcefully dispersed, the video had racked up millions of views. The hashtag #StandWithZariah was trending worldwide. Celebrities, activists, and politicians were all talking about it. But it wasn't just the shove that outraged people. It was what happened after. Hours later, the official police statement was released. The suspect was resisting arrest and became physically aggressive, forcing officers to take necessary action. That's when the internet erupted. People compared the police report to the footage. They zoomed in. They analyzed frame by frame. Zariah had never resisted. Barrett had never been in danger. And that's when someone found something even worse. Barrett had a history. A local journalist, sifting through old reports, uncovered an unsettling pattern. Over the past 5 years, Sergeant Barrett had been involved in multiple complaints of excessive force, all against black protesters. But every case, dismissed, swept under the rug, buried beneath lack of evidence. Now, people weren't just demanding justice for Zariah. They were digging into every single one of his past cases. And what they found? It was worse than anyone imagined. The next morning, Zariah spoke out. Standing in front of the courthouse, the same place where she had been attacked the night before, she delivered a speech that no one would forget. "You tried to silence me. You tried to bury the truth. But what you didn't realize is that the truth is louder than fear. And now the world is listening." The crowd erupted. But it wasn't just the people standing in front of her. It was millions of people across the country, across the world. News stations picked up her speech in real time. Politicians were forced to respond. The mayor was pressured to take action. And Sergeant Barrett? He wasn't prepared for what happened next. That evening, a high-ranking police official held a press conference. The crowd was silent, the air heavy with anticipation. Then, the official cleared his throat and said the words that sent shockwaves through the city. Effective immediately, Sergeant Lucas Barrett has been placed under investigation. A murmur spread through the crowd. And then, additionally, new evidence has emerged regarding past incidents. We are reopening several closed cases. The weight of those words hit like a bomb. Barrett's face was plastered across every screen in America, and for the first time in his career, he was the one under scrutiny. But what no one knew, what no one expected, was that this wasn't over, because someone had been covering for him all along, and they were about to be exposed next. The moment Sergeant Lucas Barrett's suspension was announced, everything changed. The media swarmed the case like vultures, reporters dissecting every second of footage, every complaint that had been buried. Protesters filled the streets, not just in Atlanta, but in dozens of cities across the country. But behind the scenes, something darker was happening. Because while the public celebrated what felt like a victory, Barrett wasn't the only one with something to hide. And the system? It wasn't ready to break just yet. 2 days after his suspension, Barrett vanished. Not arrested, not detained, just gone. The police department released a brief statement claiming he had been temporarily removed from active duty while the investigation unfolded. But Zariah Monroe wasn't buying it. Neither was Malik Shepard, a journalist who had been covering police corruption for years. "We both know this isn't just about Barrett," Malik told Zariah, pacing in her small apartment. "The way they're moving, the way they're trying to control the narrative, they're protecting something, someone bigger." Zariah frowned, arms crossed. "Then we find out who." But before they could even begin their own digging, something explosive happened. A whistleblower came forward. It started with an email, a blocked sender, no traceable IP. Just a single message sitting in Malik's inbox. Check the internal reports from 2017. Barrett was just a tool. The real power is higher up. Attached, a classified document from the Atlanta PD. Malik's heart pounded as he read through it. The file detailed an internal investigation into Barrett's actions from 5 years ago, a report that never saw the light of day. The conclusion? Barrett should have been fired. But instead, someone overruled the recommendation, and that someone was the chief of police himself. Chief Nathan Holloway had been leading the department for a decade. Respected, untouchable, a man who had shaped Atlanta's policing policies from the ground up. But in that moment, Zariah and Malik knew the truth. Holloway had protected Barrett, covered for him, kept him on the force, not because he was valuable, but because he was expendable, a pawn in a larger game. And if Holloway was involved, that meant Barrett wasn't acting alone. The night after Malik received the email, someone broke into his apartment. No forced entry, no stolen items, just a single message scrawled across his office wall in red marker. "Stop digging." That's when he knew. They were being watched. Zariah refused to back down. "They're scared," she said, voice firm. "If they weren't, they wouldn't be trying to silence us." But Malik wasn't convinced. Scared men do dangerous things. And he was right, because the next morning, they found Sergeant Barrett, dead. His body was discovered in an abandoned warehouse outside the city. Gunshot wound to the chest, no signs of struggle. The official report? Suicide. But no one believed that. The same police department that had protected him for years was suddenly eager to close the case. Too eager. Then Malik received another email from the anonymous whistleblower. Barrett was eliminated. Holloway is cleaning house. If you want the real story, look into Project Sentinel. Neither of them had ever heard of it. But what they found next? It changed everything. Project Sentinel was a classified police initiative dating back years. Buried within layers of bureaucratic jargon and redacted reports, one thing became very clear. It wasn't just about Barrett. The entire department had been involved. Project Sentinel was an unofficial directive, a covert policy designed to contain high-profile protests before they got out of control. Translation: targeting activists, disrupting protests, silencing voices. And the worst part? Zariah's protest wasn't the first, and Barrett wasn't the only officer who had been protected. Armed with everything they had, Zariah and Malik went public. They released everything: the files, the reports, the truth. And within hours, the fallout was immediate. Chief Holloway, forced to resign. Several high-ranking officers, placed under federal investigation. The Department of Justice opened a full-scale probe into Project Sentinel. And Zariah? She became more than an activist. She became a movement. 2 weeks later, Malik received one last email from the whistleblower. This time, it was just a single sentence. You exposed them, but you haven't stopped them. Attached was a list of other cities, other departments, other names. Because Project Sentinel wasn't just in Atlanta. It was everywhere. And the people behind it, they weren't done yet.